Hello everyone, welcome back to Tidgney's GT Sport Driving School. Woohoo, it's back! Oh my god, where's it been, Tidge? Yes, it's been a while since we've done one of these. We do have 3 episodes to go, and this one is all about wet weather driving. Now, being British, yeah, I'm used to the rain, of course, but obviously, GT Sport rain is not like real life. However, I have done very well in wet weather races. I mean, if you look at a World Tour event at Salzburg, Team Audi, we won. You know, I got pole position for the team. I went out and did half the race there in that first race. Double H and Demon then went on to finish that race as well, and we won that race. So, you know, I do know a little bit about wet weather racing. You know, we don't have it all our own way in those races, although MR cars are slightly better, but we'll talk about that soon. So, as I just mentioned, it's not like real life, okay? So in real life, if you've got wet weather racing, you're taking alternative lines, you're trying to get off the racing line because all the rubber is making it very slippy. GT Sport doesn't have any changing lines. It basically, it's either wet or it's dry. Very simply, you know, you're either going to have no grip or have all the grip, depending on dry or wetness. So straight off the bat, that's something you don't have to think of in GT Sport. In other games, you do have to think about the drying line, for example, potentially puddles in some games, but in GT Sport, you don't have to think about that. So we're going to look at 3 main aspects here, okay? I've just got my list in front of me to make sure we cover this. Now, we've talked about each one of these separately in their own episode. So, first of all, we're going to talk about accelerating in the wet weather, because obviously less grip. What are we going to have to think about here when we accelerate out of a corner? We're then going to look at braking into a corner. Now, this is kind of tricky because it's very hard to demonstrate, but we've talked about braking efficiency in the past, and the wet weather amplifies this so much, okay? And braking is actually something you want to avoid in the wet weather, if at all possible. And then we're going to look at weight transition. Again, that sort of leads on from braking into a corner, okay? So what we'll do, we'll look at accelerating first. In fact, let's jump to that now. Let's jump to the Audi R8 at Red Bull Ring in the wet. Here we are then at Red Bull Ring, and what I did is I just created a lobby in the wet weather conditions. What we're going to do first is an outlap, and I'm just going to show you how sensitive the car is. Obviously some of you will be very much used to this sort of thing, some of you may not be, which is why I'm going to show you this outlap. Now first of all, you noticed that I was hitting the rev limiter for quite a while. One thing you've got to realise is that even though it's raining and you get wheel spin, you still want to be in the peak power of the car in Gran Turismo. So coming up to turn 2 here, for example, you're going to notice I'm very delayed with the throttle. Now we go. Limiter. So you can see I'm trying to get the peak power out of the car, which is at the end of the revs in this car because it's naturally aspirated. So very quickly there, that's one thing you need to work out straight off the bat. Where is your peak power? And we'll talk about that a little bit more in the weight transfer part of this video, because obviously MR cars, they've got a lot of weight in the rear, it puts it down over the rear tyres. You can see there, that's a very dangerous corner, accelerating out of there. You know, if you do try this test yourself, you see I just understeer off there. Again, we'll look at this in the weight transfer bit again, because this is all weight transfer at the moment. But we're going to look at accelerating. Obviously accelerating puts weight over the rear wheels, but the key focus here is what am I doing in every single of these corners as I accelerate. And the key thing I'm doing here is I'm straightening up the car. I'm waiting for that car to be straight before accelerating. We saw that on the sharp right turn 2. On the turn 3, you can see how it's a lot harder, a lot difficult. It's all about straightening the car up, and that's because a car goes fastest in a straight line, you know. Think of a drag strip, boom, straight off the bat. And we talked about this in the accelerating episode as well. So we're going to go on to our first quick lap here. Now this isn't fast by any means. So we get to turn 1 here. Watch how I handle the car here now. So I'm coming off the brakes and I'm just rolling the car around, rolling the car, not full throttle until I'm straight, until I know I can control it. That is when I go in this car, okay? I'll wait until it's straight and then I go for it. Now, it's quite easy to do when the corners are right angles, like this corner and this one as well. Again, you're going to see me just really get the car turned in here. Slowly on the throttle. Wait. It's straight now. Foot to the floor, off I go. Very easy to do, right? So, on right hand right angled corners, 90-degree corners. Just get around the corner, plant your foot, and off you go. Now, when you get to a corner like this is where it gets difficult, okay? You're constantly turning on this next corner, so it's a lot harder to accelerate. So we're just going around in second gear here. Now watch the car want to oversteer and try to kill me. Straight off the bat there, you notice that? And now I'm trying to catch it. This is all that pendulum effect with weight transfer that I talked about before. So straight off the bat there, because I'm turning the wheel and trying to accelerate, the car wants to oversteer. So this is what I'm trying to explain in terms of accelerating. Make sure the car is straight before accelerating. Now, depending on the car, will depend on the situation really. And we'll talk about why I'm balancing the throttle in the weight transfer part. But key thing here, as you see there, I'm slightly turning, so the car wants to oversteer. I'm trying to catch that oversteer. It's all about straightening the car up and then accelerating. If you've got full 90-degree lock and you accelerate, you're just going to spin. Especially in an FR car. MR cars, a little bit less, but you can still see it's trying to lose the rear constantly. And that's because I'm trying to accelerate a little bit too early. Now you can build that confidence up and learn a bit more as we're going to head towards this line. I think this is a 146. I'm going to stop it here. And basically, you know, keeping a car, well, getting a car straight and then accelerating, you know what the car's going to do, okay? You know it should go straight. There may be a slight little bit of oversteer, but you can catch that because the car's going straight. If there's any sort of oversteer that's about to happen, you should be able to correct that fairly quickly. You know what's going to happen. If you're turning the car and it starts to oversteer, you either got to do a quick catch or you can prepare for that. So obviously turn 3, I know it was going to oversteer, so I started to catch it. So I didn't actually spin. But if I didn't know it was going to oversteer, I would have spam. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to compare 2 laps. No, actually, we're going to look at a little bit more, actually, of turn 3. Because I want to show you what happens when you know what's going to happen with the car and then how to control it. And then we'll show you 2 laps, side by side, the different throttle inputs that's happening on a corner-by-corner basis. Here we are then, with a little bit more confidence on the next lap, heading down towards this right-hander here. So heading down into the brake zone, second gear. Now we've already had a bit of oversteer here once, so we should know that the car wants to oversteer as we go through here. So we're going to start to turn into it early. Notice we try and get on full on the throttle there. A little bit of catch in there, and you can see that on the inputs. We catch it again as well. A little bit of a lift off there because we don't fully catch it. We still oversteer a little bit to the left, but we bring it back to the right. And we continue on. So that was fairly confident. You can see that we're on the throttle quite early here. Now, here we didn't have the confidence yet, so you can see we're just rolling through the corner. Rolling. We're just slowly accelerating. A little bit of oversteer there that we did not want. And then we finally get to accelerate there when we are straight and then we leave the corner. So you see there's very little turning inputs happening there as we were going into that corner because we weren't confident. So we were just waiting for that input to get less and less and less and then accelerate. Doing the same thing again then, heading down towards this right-hander here. In towards the braking zone, just click the curb there, lovely stuff. And again, we know what's going to happen initially here. We know it's going to oversteer, so we start to catch it before it even happens really. We know in the rev range it's going to happen. Now that oversteered much earlier this time. Got a little bit too confident there. So we oversteered too much and we lost a lot of time there just by having to really catch it. So again, we're just waiting here. Notice how the car's wanting to oversteer. Wait until we're straight, then we brake. Now we should have a bit more confidence this time for this corner. Rolling half throttle here. Ooh, a little bit of oversteer. Have to let it come back to us. Now we can accelerate through the oversteer. We know exactly what's going to happen with the car. We can accelerate accordingly. Now we did lose a lot of time in turn 3 there because the second oversteer was much bigger than last time. So we had to really lift off to bring the car back. And then it cost us in the left as well because the car's still having those micro transitions with weight, which we have in the game. What we're going to do now is going to go on to the quickest lap I did in terms of the accelerating episode or accelerating part of this. So heading towards turn 1, remember, you want to keep accelerating straight and true in this. But if you can balance the throttle, as you see there, a little bit of balancing, through I go, and then the car is straight, and then I accelerate. That's the critical thing here. Make sure the car is straight. If you can't get it straight, keep the steering inputs as low as possible. And you can see that by that red dot down at the bottom there. In towards the braking again, straight line braking as best as we can. That's the best way to be efficient in the wet. Is to straight line everything. Again, just balancing the car. Once we're straight, we accelerate away there. Really abuse the revs of this car as we're going to head once again to turn 3. Let's see how we do it this time. I can't remember how I did this last time. So let's head there now in towards the braking zone. Again, second gear, keeping it straight. Now we're trying to turn into the corner as we accelerate through, bouncing the car. Balancing, balance. Once we're a little bit straight, we tried to pull it back. Oh, we had to let off a big... We knew we were going to oversteer then, so we didn't go full throttle. You notice how the car, we sort of caught it, but then it went straight? That's the weight transfer, and we're going to talk about weight transfer at the very end of this video. Continue on then into this left-hander. How do we do this? We're well up on our time here. So a little bit of balancing the throttle there. Much more on the throttle than previous. Near full throttle, you can see that oversteer then. And notice the steering inputs there as well. My word, that was a lot of left, right, left, right, left, right. And that again is to straighten the car. It's the balance. Think of it. Go 100% left, 100% right, 100% left, 100% right. It's suddenly even. It's trying to balance that weight in the car, but also making sure the car stays straight and true as we come round there again. Oh, too much oversteer. It had to lift off, let the car come back to us, and then we cross the line. And what I want to do, I want to go back and just show you the oversteer catching that I was doing there to make sure the car stayed straight. So here we go then. We're going to head down towards the left-hander here. And we're just turning, zoom in here. Now watch that red dot. That red dot is the signal of input. So we know we're going around the left here. We're going to start to straighten up. You're going to see the curb on the right hand side here. There we go. So we're just turning now. That's our steering input. And then we can see the car wanting to oversteer. So we go left. And we go left again to catch it. Left again to catch it. While we're still trying to turn right. So you can see that quick inputs that happen there to try and make sure this car stays in a straight line. So, you know, that's me knowing what the car's doing. I'm trying to catch it, trying to catch it, trying to catch it. And I can tell you now that a lot of speed in my qualifying laps at the World Tour event was made in that corner because I was accelerating 100% while catching an oversteer. So the car was technically staying straight or doing a tiny bit of a four-wheel drift, but going forward. And remember, it's all about efficiency here. If you're going straight, the wheels are gripping as much as they can, and you're accelerating out the corner, you're being efficient, you are being quick. You are then accelerating, unlike that little bit of oversteer there. That's accelerating for you, so top tip there, stay straight. Let's head to braking now. Here we are then, on zero brake balance, so neutral car here, how the game was designed with the Audi R8. So, first of all, with braking, notice how I'm in a straight line. You'll notice the red dot, the steering input, change slightly under braking. Now, with zero, MR cars like to oversteer a little bit under braking. You will see that quite often if you drive the cars. Even in the dry, they like to oversteer a bit under braking. But I'm trying to keep my braking straight line. As I've mentioned in the braking episode, and technically with the acceleration I talked about earlier, the braking episode in the driving school, straight line braking, 100% braking will happen if you're in a straight line. The moment you start turning, remember, wheels can only do 100%. If you turn 50%, you can only brake 50%. You turn 60, you can only brake 40. You turn 0, you can brake 100. I want you to think of it like that. I talked about that in the braking episode. Do go check that out. It's one of the best pieces of advice I can give anybody in terms of tyres. But one thing you're seeing here is every time I get to a braking zone, I am literally braking well before the corner. Straight line braking, 100% braking. Normally you'd like to trail brake, but we don't want to do that in the wet. Here's why. As I brake into here, notice I'm trying to trail brake. And then I brake again, and I just understeer off a little bit there. With that second little bit of a brake, I just understeer a little bit more. So we come into this left-hander now. Just trying to get round. Again, I broke before the corner. Let's have a look how we do the last sector then. So, if you dab the brake mid-corner, usually in the wet, you're going to understeer off further. So, one thing you want to do is roll through the corner. We'll talk about that in the weight bit. Notice a little bit of a dab to try and slow myself down. Fortunately, it was a small dab, so it's fine. Again, 100% braking. I'm trying to lift, let the car roll, and then accelerate through the corner. So quite quickly there, in that lap, you should have seen that I'm only straight line braking to get the majority of the speed off. There's a lot less threshold braking happening, or trail braking, or whatever you want to call it, where you would normally brake all the way towards the apex. I'm not doing that anymore. I am literally trying to brake well before the corner and let the car just roll through it. That way the car stays stable, and that's exactly what you want. We notice that obviously there's a little bit of movement in braking. It just wiggles a little bit. We've seen that with many cars under braking in the wet conditions. And also that as you dab the brake mid-corner, especially if the car already wants to wiggle in a straight line, you're more than likely going to understeer or oversteer off, depending on what happens with the weight. What we're going to do now, we're going to look at a +5 lap and then a -5 lap. So let me load them up now. Yeah, you'll see a massive difference then. Because obviously 0 is neutral car, +5 all the way to the rear, -5 all the way to the front. Here we go then with +5 brake balance. As we know with +5 brake balance, it causes oversteer basically, but it does give you a little bit more turning. So what we're going to do, we want to focus mainly on what the car's doing and that red dot and see, you know, what interactions I'm having. Now, the first thing you can see quite clearly is that the car is turning in much easier, which is expected with +5. The front's not doing as much, obviously. The tyres then are doing less braking, they can turn a little bit more, all that good stuff. Now, as we head towards turn 2, I want you to watch the car here. I have to start catching it. You notice the rear come out a little bit. I've actually compromised this corner slightly. I was a little bit more to the right than I should be. I need to be very close to that curb on the left. It'll allow me to just get round and go through the corner. And that's all because there's +5 braking. Obviously, to brake efficiently, you want to brake in a straight line. 100% braking in a straight line. As we come down here, you notice the car is wiggling all over the show here. And in fact, we don't lose enough speed here because we go too deep there. Because the rear is wiggling, we're not getting 100% braking efficiency. As we head up to this left-hander, we are actually going to lose it here as well a little bit. Under braking, doing what we did before. Notice the car instantly wants to turn. So I've talked about this in the braking guide episode of the driving school. Do go check that out. It's a really good episode, especially that complements this very well. In that a tyre can only do 100% of something. So if you're braking in a straight line, that's all the tyre is doing. It is braking, it is stopping the car. If you brake and turn in, it can only do 50% of the braking, and then you're also turning. Well, if the car starts to oversteer, you're then going to have to turn more. You could brake less, and that's what we saw at turn 3. So +5 braking is causing us to have inefficiencies in braking, not good. Now you can overlay here to obviously start reducing that. So overlay is where you brake and dab the throttle a little bit, and that kind of reduces oversteer and causes understeer. Now what we're going to do, go to -5 now. So obviously this means the front tyres stopping us in a straight line. All that weight is on the front, so the tyres are obviously getting a huge impact of force, but it allows us to brake in a straight line. Because literally, with all the weight over the front, the tyres are having a huge hit on the tarmac. That allows the brakes to really get efficient because now they've got more of the tyre to use. Notice as we come down to here, we're just going to brake in a straight line here. The red dot is hardly moving there. Perfect. That's exactly what we want, braking efficiency. Now we know with -5 it actually causes a little bit of understeer. Well, not a little bit, a lot of understeer. So, you know, you have to pick accordingly. Like my 45-1 was done with -1, I think it was, at the time. So as we head down here, again, we're going to look at how the car handles itself. Under braking, there's a little bit of movement there. Nothing major though, very controllable. And look at that, we make the apex. It's beautiful. And obviously if we make an apex, it means the car settled on the exit, and then we can do something like this. A little bit of oversteer, nothing major though, and we're full throttle here. We don't even lift as we head towards this left. Now we saw oversteer with +5. We're actually trail braking here. Now I did say earlier, don't trail brake. When you build your confidence up, obviously trail braking will become faster because you can just reduce that a little bit more speed, and it means you can brake a little bit later. However, you do run the risk then of what I showed you earlier, where if you're trail braking, the car will start to understeer off, or potentially even oversteer, depending on how the brakes are set up and what car you're in, because literally you're asking the tyres to do stuff on very limited grip. So you do have to be careful with that. Obviously, I've then built the confidence up in this car to be able to trail brake a little bit in the wet, which is the main goal. Remember, if you can do something, it's always better than nothing, in most situations anyway. And that situation is here as well. Once you have the confidence, sometimes it's better to not do anything if you are struggling with the car oversteering on exit. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to this part of the laps that we just saw, okay? And I want you to focus on those red dots. We'll slow it down here and look at the red dots here. So we're a little bit on the left, but then it stays straight. While on the right, you can notice it's literally moving, and I'm trying to catch it and catch it. I'm turning left here on the right-hander, whereas the other time I'm just turning right on the left-hand side. I'm just turning right on the right. I was turning left into a right-hander. So I was trying to catch the car. That's not good. That means I'm not getting 100% brake efficiency, which is what you need in the wet. So I'm going to head towards this left, and we know what happens in this left. We'll catch up the clips there. Now we'll catch what we're caught up. Going to the left, and again, similar sort of braking, but again, top right, notice the car starts to oversteer, having to try and catch that. Whereas on the left, all I'm doing is turning into the corner because the car is settled under braking, and I did a little bit of trail braking, which I talked about. But the critical thing I've got to say here is tyres can only do 100% of something. I talked about this in the braking episode. If they can do 100% braking, they're going to stop the car effectively. Now, the main problem in the wet is people losing control. And it's easy to lose control. It's very, very slippy. It's like the Turkey Grand Prix that's just happened recently. Very, very slippy. And if you have the grip, you can work the tyres. You know, your car can work very well. So if you can work the car very well, then you're going to win in the wet. And that's the whole point of this. So one thing to look at is braking efficiency. Now, as I say, you can overlay a little bit if you want a the brake balance towards the rear, but again, that's another skill you've got to build on top of that. If I was a beginner or an intermediate, the critical thing I would say here is literally brake in a straight line, release the brake slowly but surely, and I'll talk about that in a second with weight transfer, turn into the corner, let the car roll, just don't do anything. In this situation, it's okay. And then on the exit, when you've got the car straight and you're happy to accelerate, then accelerate away. Don't threshold brake, trail brake towards the apex, because I think you will start to understeer. As you get more advanced, you can then start to add a little bit of trail braking in, really start to push the car, and then you'll see your times come down further. But start simple. Brake 100%, turn, accelerate 100%. Very simple. Then the tyres are only ever doing one thing: braking, turning, accelerating. Right. Let's now jump to weight transfer, where we just talk about the final little aspect of driving in the wet. With weight transfer then, this is all about braking and accelerating, what we've just looked at, but this is also making sure the car is stable. So I've talked about weight transfer in a previous episode. All these episodes are down below, by the way. But essentially, in Gran Turismo, it's very weight dependent to how the car handles. You know, if you turn too much, the weight's going to shift really hard to one side of the car, and it could cause some oversteer. What we see in the wet, and why MR cars are better than FR cars, is when they accelerate, all the weight goes over the rear wheels in any car. But what happens in a MR car is that the engine is near the back of the rear wheels. There's more weight over the rear of the car. So guess what? The rear tyres get pushed into the ground, and they can accelerate much better in the wet than the FR cars. Now, this is also the same when they're on racing hard tyres. You'll notice that on racing hard tyres, MR cars are far more dominant than FR cars. It's the same sort of principle. So when you accelerate in these cars, you want to make sure that there is weight over the rear wheels. Now, one little trick you can do is that I did just say do nothing while you're turning, but as you're turning, you could apply a little bit of throttle. And what we're going to do, we're going to look at my fastest lap again, and I'm just going to show you that technique there. Now, when we look at braking, when you brake, I did show you quite a lot of braking in the previous clips, but essentially you want to roll off the brakes. Now, one reason I feel I am quite good in the wet is I'm a very smooth driver, you know, in terms of my braking and in terms of my accelerating. The minute I go aggressive, my driving standards drop massively. I'm very smooth. It's why I'm good at where there's smooth driving required at certain tracks. When it's aggressive driving, lots of hairpins, I'm no good at those kind of tracks. Smooth driving is where I'm happy, and this is probably why I'm better than normal, I would say, in the wet. So when I brake, I'm rolling slowly off the brakes. I'm not instantly coming off the brakes, because if I do that, the car's going to go, whoa, what's happened? The whole of the weight is going to go off the front and settle back in the middle of the car very fast. That's going to cause a little bit of stability issues. Same with the throttle. If you go from 0 to 100% throttle in a corner, I've talked about this in a driving school as well, in cornering, basically what's going to happen is the car's going to go, whoa, you want me to do what now? The whole of the front of the car is going to lift. You're going to understeer, potentially get power oversteer then as well, and all sorts is going to happen. So if you can do, let's say, 50% accelerating in a corner before you leave it, then you've already got 50% of the weight. Just, it's not, in reality, it's not 50% of the weight, but just imagine it. You've already got 50% of the weight over the rear wheels. So you're going to go from 50 to 100 rather than 0 to 100. That's drastic. And that's what we look at here. The weight being smoothly transitioned in the car, so the car stays stable rather than moves about with the weight, so it causes a little bit of oversteer, a little bit of understeer. As we've seen with the braking, with a +5 versus -5, even a tiny adjustment is causing significant differences in cornering and losing the efficiency that you want. So let's look at that lap now, and we'll just look at the accelerating and braking, and we'll look at that in 50% as well. Here we go then, with the fastest lap once again. Now, in the actual practice for the World Tour event, I think I was in low 44, so there's a significant amount of time in this lap still, but obviously I just jumped on so I could do this video for you with the driving school. So as we head towards turn 1, 100% braking as I've been talking about, then watch me lift off that brake, rolled off. I noticed I stopped briefly at that around 50% marker. That obviously stabilized the weight a little bit, then I rolled off a little bit more. Obviously we know the pedals aren't linear in Gran Turismo, which makes it a little bit more difficult to do this kind of stuff. Because if it's linear, it's much more easy to handle, whereas in Gran Turismo, it's not linear, so you've got to realise that obviously the last 50% of the pedal is probably going to have a more spiky profile than the first 50%. I'm not exactly sure on the curve there. It's just ingrained into me with all the Gran Turismo I'm playing. Once again, we're going to head towards this braking zone then. 100% braking, as I've been talking about. And then we should start to release the brake around about now. Again, notice how I stop braking. I'm rolling a little bit. Notice the throttle here now. A little bit of throttle. It's a very tight corner, so I don't want to go 100%. I'm really building it up, build up, then flat out then at that point, really abusing those revs. So you notice how in the braking, at least, I'm always pulling it back to around 50-40% just for a brief moment and then releasing it. It's a very stable way to brake. Now, you can be a lot smoother than this, obviously a bit more practice and I'll be much smoother with it. And you notice with the throttle, I was really being gentle with that throttle. So let's head down towards this right-hander then. Again, 100% braking in a straight line. This is where the majority of the stopping is going to happen. Weight is now settled. I'm slowly coming off the brakes there. Lovely stuff. Now I'm balancing the throttle a little bit. This is balancing the weight over the rear wheels. So the car's now stable. I can then begin to increase that acceleration 100%. Change up a gear. I've had to come off it a little bit. I'm expecting some oversteer. There's the oversteer. I then bounce the car up again. And we continue on out that corner flat out at this point. As we then head for more braking. So you can see quite quickly how the weight of the car is being stabilized with the brakes and also the accelerator. Okay, so I'm going to start to go on the throttle here again. Notice that now it's time to balance the car on the exit because I know it's going to oversteer. We know there's not that much grip, and when I'm straight I can accelerate fully. Going from 50 to 100% acceleration is far better in terms of stabilizing weight than going from 0 to 100. If you try 0 to 100 constantly, you're going to always spin. Try to just do a little bit of throttle through a corner and you should be fine. Also, one thing to mention, with cornering, you want to keep a constant turning angle, okay? If you don't, the weight's going to shift in the car, and I talked about in this cornering episode. So do go check that out as well. But if you don't keep a constant angle, what you're going to have is a pendulum effect with the weight, and that's going to cause you to significantly understeer or oversteer in the wet. Remember, everything is amplified in wet weather racing in Gran Turismo. Whether it's turning, braking, or accelerating, everything is amplified. So you really have to focus on it that bit more. And that's the critical thing to do while driving. You notice here I'm just trail braking a little bit. Again, I'm keeping the car stable. Again, that modulated throttle there, up to 50%. When I'm fine, 100. But I know I've oversteered a bit too much there. It's gone a little bit too early with the increase of throttle. But that is that in terms of weight transfer, braking and accelerating. So there's some key things to take away from this, and I've mentioned them already, but you know, just in a nutshell here to summarize this entire video. Accelerating, you want to make sure the car is straight. You can see constantly throughout the laps that I've shown you, I always make sure the car is straight before I'm 100% throttle. I eventually build up the confidence to maybe turn into the oversteer a little bit to increase my lap times, but I'm always straight initially with that 100% throttle. Braking, always 100% braking. Again, it's the best way to brake any car in any race. If you're braking 100%, happy days, you are stopping the quickest you possibly can. So, and make sure you're not even turning even minutely in the car. 100% braking, that is what you're after. Then finally, weight transfer, weight transition in the car. You'll notice, as I showed you on that lap, literally just rolling off the brakes, even just stopping, releasing the brakes at around 50-40% just for a brief moment, stabilizes the car a bit, and then I release the rest. Is that two-phase of braking, and then the same for accelerating. There's like a two-phase where I go from 0 to 50 slowly but surely, and then 50 to 100 is quite quick. Again, that's because of that non-linear curve. I'm balancing the car, I'm balancing the weight, so the car is not, you know, if you chuck something 100% or chuck something at 50%, it's much easier to be predictable with 50% than 100%. And that is what I'm trying to explain here. It's so hard to do in a video, but that's what I've tried to demonstrate with this video. Hope you enjoyed this driving school. We have a couple more episodes left, of course, and I'm going to get those out hopefully before Christmas, so keep an eye out for those. If you don't want to miss them, of course you can hit subscribe and do all that good stuff. If you did like the video, like it. If you disliked it, make sure you leave a comment as to why you disliked it. If you've got any questions, also leave a comment as well. It's always good to answer those questions, and I will answer questions that are fired out there. But that's going to be it for me now, folks. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in another video or live stream again very soon.